Okay, so get ready because this is going to be pretty intense stuff.
Yeah,
We're diving deep into Red Zone 7. And the excerpts you sent in, wow, they are something else. I mean, we're talking about contemporary Chinese political thought, but this is like next level. It's raw. It's urgent.
It's really unlike anything I've seen before. What's striking is how Red Zone 7 goes right for the core of what it means to be Chinese. They're questioning these really ingrained narratives about history, identity, even the very idea of a unified China.
It's like they're saying, think again. Everything you thought you knew about China, think again. And then there's that quote, the most vicious curse for you is, you are Chinese. Your whole family is Chinese.
I mean, wow. Where do we even begin with that? Yeah, it's definitely a punch to the gut, and I think it gets at the heart of Red 07's argument, which is that this whole concept of a unified China as it exists now, it's not about liberation. It's a tool for control. They argue that throughout history, the Chinese people have been treated as subjects, not citizens denied basic rights and autonomy.
So the curse, then, is this legacy of oppression, this system that always puts the collective above the individual.
That's exactly it. Red Dove 07 argues that this system, it conditions people to value obedience above everything else. Loyalty to the state trumps individual liberty, and you see it everywhere. They see it reflected in family dynamics, in the education system, and of course, in the government's response to things like COVID-19.
Yeah, and speaking of COVID, Red Dove 07 does not hold back when it comes to the government's response. That phrase, Xi Jinping's virus economics, that really stood out.
It's a powerful way to frame it, because Red Jetter 07 argues that the lockdowns, the mass testing, the surveillance, it wasn't just about public health. They were tools to consolidate power.
It's a chilling thought, especially when they connect it to things like the Cultural Revolution and the situation in Xinjiang.
Right. It's like they're drawing a direct line from those events to what's happening right now.
Like a pattern.
Exactly. And they're particularly worried about these new enforcers, as they call them, the dabai, the people in hazmat suits who are enforcing all these restrictions.
Right, like that scene they described from the Shanghai lockdown. People are terrified, they're starving, and even after an earthquake, they're too afraid to leave their homes because of these restrictions.
It makes you wonder at what cost. At what cost is this control being maintained?
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
And I think that's the question Red Zone 7 wants us to grapple with.
It feels like they're saying that this pursuit of a unified China, at least under the current regime, is coming at a very steep price. The suppression of individual rights, free thought, even basic human dignity.
Exactly.
It's like they're saying this need for control is baked into the system, like it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah, it's deeply ingrained in the fabric of Chinese society, and Red Zone 7 traces it back through history. They argue that this desire for a unified, homogenous China, it's not new at Chinese Communist Party, in their view, is just the latest chapter in a long story.
Right, like they go way back to ancient dynasties, using similar tactics to maintain power.
Exactly. They draw these parallels to things like the mandate of heaven, this idea that was used to legitimize imperial rule. Throughout history, dissenting voices were silenced, often brutally, all to maintain this vision of a unified China.
So this isn't just a Communist Party thing, it's much deeper and older. And they really single out the Chinese education system as a way this keeps going.
Absolutely. They argue that the education system, it's designed to produce obedient, unquestioning citizens, not critical thinkers. They point to the emphasis on memorization, on accepting one official version of history. There's not a lot of room for critical thinking or questioning the status quo.
It's like they're saying the system is designed to create followers, not leaders.
Right. And then they talk about this sense of apathy among many Chinese people.
Which makes sense if you think about it.
It does. Red 07 understands why many choose to go along to prioritize stability and security, but they also see it as a trap, a form of self-imposed imprisonment.
Which brings us back to that idea of the curse of being Chinese.
Exactly. They believe this conditioning, this acceptance of control as normal, that's the real curse. And until people realize they have their own agency, their own power to demand better, the cycle will continue.
That's a bold statement, especially given the risks of speaking out in China.
Yeah.
And Red 07 doesn't shy away from the role of technology and surveillance in all this.
Yeah, that's one of the most concerning aspects of their analysis. They argue that the government's use of facial recognition, social media monitoring the social credit system, it's created this unprecedented level of control.
It's like that Orwellian dystopia we always hear about. It's becoming a reality in China, and they bring it to life with these really personal stories.
That's what makes their work so powerful. They weave together these big, complex arguments with these incredibly personal, often heartbreaking stories of individuals, families torn apart, artists, silenced ordinary citizens imprisoned just for expressing their opinions.
Like that story about the young girl in Shanghai who asks her father, "Why can't we stay in our own home? Have we committed a crime?" That one really got to me.
It's heartbreaking, Ray, and it sums up the tragedy of what's happening. These measures justified in the name of safety and unity are creating a climate of fear and paranoia. Even basic desires like having a home or speaking your mind are criminalized.
It's a powerful critique of a system that claims to be acting in the best interests of its people, but is actively taking away their freedoms. But Red 07 doesn't just leave us with a critique. They offer a path forward. What does that look like?
Red 07 envisions a China that embraces a different kind of strength. One rooted in individual liberty, critical thinking, and a commitment to truth. They believe that real progress means embracing diversity of thought, encouraging dissent, allowing for a more open and democratic society.
That's a radical idea in the context of how things are right now in China.
It is, but Red 07 sees this as a turning point. They believe the current situation is unsustainable. This level of control, it can't last forever. They see hope in the growing dissatisfaction, especially among young people who are hungry for freedom and autonomy.
They even question this whole idea of what it means to be Chinese, saying that true patriotism lies in questioning the status quo.
That's a key point. Red 07 wants people to understand that real patriotism isn't blind loyalty. It's about loving your country enough to hold it accountable, to demand it live up to its ideals.
So they're saying real patriotism is about more than just going along with whatever the government says.
Right.
It's about pushing for positive change, even if it means criticizing the way things are. That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, and you know what else is radical? They question this whole idea of Chinese unification being this ultimate good. Like, it's not even up for debate. They're saying it's actually harmful to people.
Yeah, like this pursuit of unity at all costs. It's creating more problems than it solves. And they even compare it to North Korea, which, wow, that's...
It's a stark comparison, for sure.
Yeah.
But it shows how worried they are about where China's headed. They argue that the government uses this idea of unification to silence anyone who disagrees and to demand total loyalty. It's very similar to what we see in North Korea.
So it's like a warning. Be careful about giving up individual freedoms in the name of unity, because look what can happen.
Exactly. And what's even more radical is that Red 07 doesn't just criticize, they actually propose a totally different model for China. Not just reforms, but like a complete reimagining of what China could be.
So instead of forcing everyone to conform, what if China embraced regional differences and gave those regions more autonomy?
Right. What if they explored models that recognize the incredible diversity within China and allow regions to have more control over their own affairs? It's a radical idea, but it fits with their whole thing about individual liberty and freedom.
It's definitely a different way of thinking about China than what we're used to.
Yeah.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around.
It is, and it's important to remember that Red 07's work doesn't give us easy answers. It's more like a challenge. It makes us rethink everything we thought we knew about China. They want us to really confront the hard truths about its past and present, and to imagine a future where the Chinese people can break free from the cycle of oppression and just be free, you know?
Such a powerful message.
Yeah.
It really makes you think. And I have to say, this whole deep dive has been eye-opening. It reminds us to look beyond the surface, to listen to the voices that are being silenced, and to never stop questioning.
I totally agree. And you know what really gets me is this. If Red 07 is right, and this obsession with a unified China is actually holding back its people, it makes you wonder what other ways of governing are out there that would allow for more freedom and self-determination, especially in a place as diverse and complex as China.
It's a question worth thinking about, that's for sure. And that's it for our deep dive today. We'll be back next time with another look at the forces shaping our world.